Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
My name is Elias. 15 years ago, I stood beside the hospital bed of my mother. She was losing her battle with cancer. Her breathing was shallow. She held my hand tightly. "Promise me you will take care of your brother and sister," my mother whispered with tears in her eyes. "Keep the family together, Elias." I was only 19 years old. I was a top student at a prestigious university, studying mechanical engineering. But on that day, I made a promise that sealed my fate. I dropped out of college. I took over the failing logistics company of our family, working 20 hours a day. I wore cheap, torn clothes so I could pay the expensive medical school tuition of my younger brother, Julian. I ate leftover food so I could fund the luxury fashion brand of my younger sister, Clara. I sacrificed my youth, my dreams, and my happiness, just to give them a perfect life. For 15 years, I lived in the old, decaying family estate. I painted the walls myself. I fixed the leaking roof. I kept the memories of our parents alive. I thought my siblings loved me. I thought they appreciated my sacrifice. I did not know I was simply feeding two greedy parasites. Today was the 15th anniversary of the death of our mother. I spent the entire afternoon cooking a massive dinner. I made the favorite roasted chicken of Julian and the special pasta of Clara. I set the table with the vintage plates of our mother. I was so excited to see my family. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the heavy front door opened. Julian walked in wearing a bespoke Italian suit. Beside him was his new wife, Victoria. Clara followed right behind them, holding the arm of her wealthy fiancé, Marcus. They did not hug me. They did not even look at the food. "This house smells like damp wood and poverty," Victoria said, while covering her nose with a designer silk scarf. Julian sighed and looked at his gold watch. "We do not have time for a pathetic family dinner, Elias," Julian said coldly. "We are here to discuss business." I stood there wiping my hands on my apron. My heart sank. "Today is the day we remember our mother," I said with a trembling voice. "Can we please just sit down and eat?" Clara let out a cruel, mocking laugh. "You are so emotional and weak, Elias," Clara sneered. "That is why you are a 40-year-old loser who still lives in the house of his dead parents. Sit down and listen to us." They walked into the dining room, completely ignoring the beautiful meal I had prepared. Julian opened his expensive leather briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents and threw them onto the dining table. "We are selling the family estate," Julian announced with a flat, emotionless tone. I froze. The room started to spin. "What are you talking about?" I asked, stepping backward. "This is our home. This is the only thing we have left of our parents." "It is a massive piece of land in a prime location," Marcus interrupted, crossing his arms with an arrogant smirk. "A commercial developer just offered $10 million to bulldoze this garbage house and build a luxury shopping mall. But you cannot do this without my signature," I pleaded, looking at my brother and sister. "We own it together." Clara rolled her eyes and pulled a pen from her designer purse. "That is exactly why we brought these papers," Elias, Clara demanded. "You will sign your share over to us right now." I looked at their faces. There was no love, there was no gratitude, there was only raw, sickening greed. "I gave up my college degree so you could become a doctor, Julian," I said, tears finally breaking through my eyes. "I worked 3 jobs so you could start your company, Clara. I raised you." Julian slammed his fist on the table. "You did what you were supposed to do," Julian shouted angrily. "Do not act like a hero. You are just a lazy, uneducated warehouse worker. You have been living here rent-free for 15 years while we became successful. You are a parasite holding us back." The words of Julian hit me like a physical punch to the chest. A parasite? They actually believed I was the parasite. I reached for the framed photograph of our mother resting on the mantelpiece. I held it tightly to my chest. "If you sell this land, they will destroy her garden," I whispered, completely broken. "Please, Julian, do not destroy her memory." Victoria walked forward and violently slapped the photograph out of my hands. The glass frame shattered into 100 pieces on the hardwood floor. "It is just a stupid picture of a dead woman," Victoria hissed with absolute disgust. "Sign the paper or we will take you to court and force the sale anyway. We have the best lawyers in the city. You cannot afford to fight us." Clara stepped over the broken glass, looking at me with pure contempt. "Pack your cheap clothes and get out of our property," Clara commanded. You are no longer part of this family. I looked down at the smiling face of my mother, trapped under the broken glass. I did not scream. I did not cry anymore. The profound, agonizing pain in my chest slowly turned into something else. It turned into a cold, terrifying clarity. I picked up the pen. I signed the transfer documents. I walked to my room, packed my single suitcase, and walked out the front door into the freezing rain. I left my ungrateful brother and sister celebrating their new millions in the dining room. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought they had won. I walked down the dark street, letting the cold rain wash over my face. Julian and Clara thought I was just a broke, uneducated warehouse worker. They thought the small logistics company of our family had never grown. They were so arrogant. They never bothered to look into the shadows. 15 years ago, I did drop out of college. But my mathematical mind did not stop working. While they were partying in their 20s, I was quietly investing every single dollar of profit from the warehouse into digital infrastructure and real estate holding firms. I created a shell corporation called Vanguard Holdings. Over a decade, I aggressively bought out supply chains across the entire country. The small family warehouse was just a disguise. Vanguard Holdings was now a logistics and real estate empire worth over $500 million. I pulled my secure cell phone from my wet pocket. I dialed the number of my lead corporate attorney. "Yes, Mr. Elias," my lawyer answered immediately. "Julian and Clara just signed the agreement to sell the estate to a commercial developer," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "That is perfect timing, sir," my lawyer replied. "Vanguard Holdings owns the commercial development firm that made the offer. We now own the land legally. Should we proceed with the demolition?" "No," I said softly, looking back at the distant lights of the mansion. "I want you to investigate the hospital of Julian and the fashion brand of Clara. I want you to buy all of their corporate debt. I want to own every single dollar they owe to the banks." I hung up the phone. They broke my heart. They broke the promise of my mother. Now I was going to break their entire world. The morning after they threw me out into the rain, Julian and Clara hosted a massive party at the family estate. They hired a luxury catering company to serve expensive champagne and caviar. The old living room, which I had cleaned with my own hands for 15 years, was filled with their wealthy, arrogant friends. "We are finally getting rid of this garbage house," Clara announced, raising her crystal glass. Marcus, her fiancé, wrapped his arm around her waist. "The developer will transfer the $10 million into our accounts next month," Marcus said loudly. "We are going to buy a penthouse in the city." Julian smiled, fixing his expensive silk tie. "And I am using my share to expand my private medical clinic," Julian told the crowd. "I am buying the latest robotic surgery equipment. The future belongs to us." They were celebrating money they did not even have yet. Because they possessed the signed contract from the commercial developer, the local banks treated them like royalty. The banks immediately approved massive, high-interest loans for both of them, using the pending $10 million sale as collateral. Julian borrowed $3 million to upgrade his clinic. Clara borrowed $2 million to fund the new seasonal line of her fashion brand and to plan an extravagant, celebrity-style wedding. They thought they were invincible. They were happily wrapping a financial noose around their own necks. Far away from the noisy party at the estate, I was standing in the penthouse office of Vanguard Holdings. The room was silent, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass windows that overlooked the financial district. I wore a perfectly tailored black suit. I was no longer the sad, exhausted brother they abused in the dining room. My lead attorney, Mr. Davis, walked into the office holding 2 thick red folders. "It is done, Mr. Elias," my lawyer said respectfully, placing the folders on my large oak desk. "Vanguard Financial has officially purchased the commercial debt of your siblings." I opened the first folder. It contained the financial records of the medical clinic of Julian. I opened the second folder. It contained the corporate credit lines of the fashion brand of Clara. "They took out massive loans this morning," my lawyer explained. "Their original banks were happy to sell the debt to us for a premium price. We now hold absolute control over their payment schedules and interest rates." I looked at the signatures of my brother and sister on the loan documents. "Did you include the margin call clause in the transfer documents?" I asked quietly. "Yes, sir," my lawyer confirmed. "If the value of their collateral drops, we have the legal right to demand full repayment within 48 hours. If they fail to pay, we can seize their businesses." I closed the folders. Perfect, I whispered. Let them spend the money. Let them fly as high as possible. The fall will break their bones. 2 weeks passed. The arrogance of Clara and Julian reached a sickening level. Clara was busy planning her multi-million-dollar wedding with Marcus. She rented the most expensive grand hotel in the city. She flew a famous designer from Paris just to make her wedding dress. She even sent me a text message from her new phone. "I am inviting you to my wedding, Elias," Clara wrote in the message. "I need someone to carry the bags of my bridesmaids. You can wear your warehouse uniform. It will be a good joke for my wealthy friends." I read the message while sitting in the back of my armored limousine. I did not reply. I simply deleted the message. Meanwhile, Julian and his wife Victoria were acting like kings at the hospital. Julian fired the older, experienced doctors to hire young, attractive staff. He bought 2 new luxury sports cars. They completely forgot about the mother they insulted. They forgot about the brother who gave up his youth to feed them. They believed they were the elite class of the city. But they were just blind fools dancing on a landmine. The trap was finally ready to snap shut. It was a Monday morning. Julian was sitting in his new clinic, waiting for the equipment delivery. Clara was at the hotel, signing the final payment contracts for the wedding catering. They were both waiting for the massive $5 million deposits to hit their bank accounts. Today was the official payout date for the sale of the family estate. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the phone of Julian rang. It was his real estate broker. "Julian, we have a massive problem," the broker said, his voice shaking with panic. "The commercial developer just halted the payment." "What do you mean they halted the payment?" Julian yelled, jumping out of his leather chair. "We signed a legally binding contract. They owe us $10 million today." The developer found a severe zoning issue with the land, the broker explained desperately. "They claim the soil is contaminated. Under Section 4 of the contract, they have the legal right to freeze the escrow funds for 6 months while an environmental audit is conducted. The money is locked. You get nothing today." Julian dropped his phone. The color completely drained from his face. Without that money, he could not pay for the expensive robotic equipment he already ordered. He could not pay the salaries of his new doctors. At the exact same time, Clara received the exact same phone call. She screamed in the lobby of the Grand Hotel, throwing her designer purse on the floor. The illusion of their massive wealth vanished into thin air. The frozen estate money was just the beginning of the nightmare, because the $10 million collateral was suddenly locked and deemed legally unstable. The automated banking systems triggered a red flag. Julian was desperately trying to call his rich friends to borrow emergency cash when his office fax machine began to print a document. It was a formal legal notice from Vanguard Financial. "Due to the severe instability of your collateral assets, your commercial loan is hereby classified as high risk," the document stated. Under the margin call clause, Vanguard Financial demands the immediate and full repayment of $3 million. You have 48 hours. Julian read the paper. His hands shook violently. He could not breathe. If he did not pay $3 million in 2 days, Vanguard Financial would legally seize his medical license, his clinic, and his personal cars. He would be completely bankrupt. He immediately called Clara. Clara answered the phone, crying hysterically. "Julian, the bank just demanded $2 million from me," Clara sobbed loudly into the phone. "The hotel is threatening to sue me for breach of contract. Marcus is refusing to answer my calls. What is Vanguard Financial? Who are these people? We need to call Elias," Julian stammered, completely losing his mind. "He knows how to deal with logistics and banks. He can help us." Julian dialed my old phone number. He expected the poor, desperate brother to pick up and save him. But the line was completely dead. The number no longer existed. The street rat they threw out into the rain had vanished. And the invisible titan of Vanguard Holdings was preparing the final blow. 48 hours is a very short time when you owe millions of dollars to a faceless corporation. Julian and Clara were desperate. They spent 2 days running around the city, begging for money. Julian tried to ask his wealthy father-in-law for a loan, but the man laughed in his face and slammed the door. Clara went to the apartment of her fiancé, Marcus. "Marcus, please, you have to help me," Clara begged, grabbing his arm. "If I do not pay Vanguard Financial by tomorrow, they will take my fashion brand. They will take my wedding dress." Marcus violently pulled his arm away. He looked at Clara with pure disgust. "I am marrying a wealthy fashion designer, not a bankrupt beggar," Marcus sneered coldly. "The wedding is canceled. Do not ever contact me again." He threw Clara out of his apartment and locked the door. Clara sat on the cold floor of the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably. The glamorous life she had built on the blood and sweat of her older brother was completely shattered. By Wednesday morning, the deadline expired. A fleet of black tow trucks arrived at the medical clinic of Julian. Security guards from Vanguard Financial walked in and ordered everyone to leave the building. They seized the luxury cars of Julian right out of the parking lot. Julian stood on the sidewalk, watching his entire career being locked behind heavy iron chains. He had nothing left. With their bank accounts frozen and their businesses seized, Julian and Clara had nowhere to go. They were forced to return to the only place that still legally belonged to them, the decaying family estate they had tried to sell. The house was cold and dark. The electricity had been cut off because they forgot to pay the bills. Julian sat on the dusty couch in the living room. Victoria, his beautiful, arrogant wife, was throwing her designer clothes into a suitcase. "Where are you going?" Julian asked, his voice weak and pathetic. "I am leaving you, Julian," Victoria yelled angrily. "You told me we were getting $10 million. Now we are hiding in a dark, disgusting house. You are a failure. I am filing for divorce tomorrow." Victoria walked out the front door, leaving Julian completely alone in the dark. Clara walked into the living room, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. "This is your fault, Julian," Clara screamed at her brother. "You told me the commercial developer was safe. You ruined my life. You ruined my wedding." Julian stood up, his face twisted with rage. He grabbed a glass vase and threw it against the wall. "Shut your mouth, Clara," Julian roared. "You took out a $2 million loan to buy party dresses. You are a stupid, useless child." The two siblings, who had united to destroy me just a few weeks ago, were now tearing each other apart like starving wolves. Without my protection, their true, ugly nature was fully exposed. The next morning, a black luxury sedan pulled up to the driveway of the dark estate. A man in a sharp suit walked to the front door and knocked loudly. Julian opened the door, looking exhausted and desperate. "Mr. Julian and Miss Clara," the man said with a polite but cold tone. "I am the legal representative of Vanguard Financial. The chairman of our corporation has requested a meeting with both of you at our headquarters today." Julian felt a sudden rush of hope. "The chairman wants to see us?" Julian asked eagerly. Clara pushed past her brother, her eyes wide with desperate greed. "Maybe he wants to negotiate," Clara whispered to Julian. "Maybe he wants to buy the estate directly from us to clear our debt. This is our chance to survive." They quickly put on their best wrinkled suits and dresses. They followed the legal representative into the luxury sedan. They thought they were going to make a deal with an old, foolish billionaire. They did not know they were walking directly into the slaughterhouse. The sedan brought them to the tallest, most intimidating skyscraper in the financial district. Julian and Clara were escorted to the top floor. The private elevator doors opened, revealing a massive, incredibly luxurious executive office. A man was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city. He wore a flawless, custom-made black suit. His back was turned to them. "Mr. Chairman," Julian said, using his most polite, submissive voice. "Thank you so much for meeting with us. We know there has been a misunderstanding with the loan payments, but we assure you the family estate is worth $10 million. Clara stepped forward, forcing a fake, sweet smile on her face. "If you forgive our debt, Mr. Chairman, we are willing to sign the property completely over to your corporation today," Clara offered desperately. The chairman did not speak. He slowly turned around to face them. The fake smile on the face of Clara instantly vanished. Julian stopped breathing. The color drained from his face until he looked like a ghost. His knees began to shake violently. Standing behind the massive oak desk, looking at them with absolute terrifying authority, was me. "Elias," Clara gasped, stepping backward in pure shock. "What are you doing here? Are you the janitor of this office?" I let out a slow, dark laugh that echoed across the massive room. I walked over to the heavy oak desk and sat down in the leather chair. I looked at the two pathetic, shivering creatures standing before me. "I am not the janitor, Clara," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, crushing whisper. "I am the founder. I am the owner. I am the chairman of Vanguard Financial." Julian fell to his knees on the expensive carpet. No, that is impossible," Julian stammered, shaking his head. "You are a warehouse worker. You have nothing." "I sacrificed my college degree for you, Julian," I said, leaning forward. "I worked 20 hours a day, but I never stopped thinking. I never stopped building. While you were buying sports cars, I was buying supply chains. While you were throwing me out into the rain, I was buying your debt. I opened a drawer and pulled out the transfer documents for the family estate. The exact same documents they tried to offer me a minute ago. I tossed the papers onto the desk. You wanted to negotiate, I stated coldly. Here is the deal. You will sign the family estate over to Vanguard Financial right now. In exchange, I will not send you to federal prison for defaulting on massive commercial loans. But Elias, that is our home, Clara cried hysterically. Where will we live? We have no money. I looked at her with eyes made of pure ice. You can go live in the streets, Clara, I said softly, just like you told me to do. Sign the papers, or my lawyers will destroy you. The silence in the executive office was heavy and suffocating. Julian stared at the transfer documents on the desk. His hand hovered over the gold pen. He was sweating profusely. He looked at his younger sister, hoping for some miraculous escape. But Clara was simply staring at the floor, completely broken. Elias, please, Julian begged, his voice cracking with desperation. We are your blood. We are family. You cannot just throw us into the streets. I leaned back in my leather chair, looking at him with absolute zero sympathy. Blood means nothing when it is poisoned with greed, Julian, I replied coldly. You threw me into the freezing rain without a second thought. You called me a parasite. Now the parasite owns your entire life. Sign the document. Julian realized there was no escape. He picked up the pen. With a trembling hand, he signed his name. Clara silently stepped forward and did the same. Her tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. I took the documents and handed them to my lawyer. The transaction is complete, I announced. You have exactly 1 hour to remove your personal items from the estate. After that, my security team will permanently lock the gates. Julian and Clara slowly walked out of the office. They looked like empty shells. The empire they thought they owned was just an illusion, and the brother they abused was the titan who shattered it. The next morning, I drove my armored limousine back to the family estate. I did not bring bulldozers. I did not bring commercial developers. I never intended to destroy the only home I had ever known. The entire commercial development offer was simply a trap I created to expose their greed. I stepped out of the car and looked at the decaying house. It is time to fix this, I whispered to myself. I hired the best historical architects and landscapers in the city. Over the next 3 months, we completely restored the estate. We repaired the roof. We painted the walls with warm, inviting colors. Most importantly, I restored the garden of my mother. I planted fresh roses and built a beautiful stone fountain in the center. I walked into the grand living room. I placed a brand new, solid silver frame on the mantelpiece. Inside the frame was the restored photograph of my mother. Her gentle smile looked over the room once again. I sat on the couch, feeling a profound sense of peace. I kept my promise, Mother, I said softly. I kept the home safe, and I removed the sickness from our family. While I was restoring the beauty of the estate, Julian and Clara were discovering the brutal, agonizing reality of the working class. Because they were completely bankrupt, they were forced to rent a tiny, dirty apartment in the worst neighborhood of the city. Julian, the man who used to drive luxury sports cars, was now working the night shift as a janitor. He wore a cheap blue uniform, pushing a heavy mop across the floors of a public hospital. Hey, clean up the mess in room 4. A young doctor ordered Julian harshly. Julian gripped the handle of the mop. His pride was burning, but he had no choice. He lowered his head and walked toward the room. Clara was not doing any better. The glamorous fashion designer was now working as a waitress at a cheap diner. She spent 12 hours a day carrying heavy trays of greasy food. Her feet were covered in blisters. Her hands, which used to wear expensive diamond rings, were now red and cracked from washing dishes in hot water. You forgot my extra ketchup, a rude customer yelled at Clara. I am so sorry, sir. I will get it right now, Clara mumbled, holding back her tears. They were finally experiencing the exhaustion and the pain that I had endured for 15 years. The universe was balancing the scales. A year passed, Vanguard Holdings grew even more powerful. To honor the memory of my mother, I established the Vanguard Cancer Foundation. I hosted a massive charity gala at the most luxurious Grand Hotel in the city to raise money for medical research. Hundreds of wealthy investors, politicians, and celebrities attended the event. I stood in the center of the grand ballroom, wearing a flawless tuxedo, shaking hands with the elite of the city. The catering company for the hotel brought out trays of expensive champagne. One of the servers, wearing a basic black and white uniform, walked into the ballroom carrying a heavy tray of drinks. It was Clara. She was exhausted. She kept her head down, trying to avoid the bright lights and the loud music. She walked toward the center of the room to serve a group of wealthy businessmen. Then she looked up. She saw a tall, powerful man standing just a few feet away. The entire room was treating him like a king. It was her older brother. Clara froze. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. The heavy silver tray slipped from her fingers. It crashed onto the marble floor with a loud, ringing sound. Glass shattered everywhere. Champagne splashed onto the expensive shoes of the guests. The entire ballroom went silent. Everyone turned to look at the clumsy waitress who had ruined the moment. Clara fell to her knees, frantically trying to pick up the broken pieces of glass with her bare hands. She was crying, her face burning with absolute shame. "Elias," Clara whispered, looking up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "Elias, please help me." She reached her bleeding hand out toward me. I looked down at her. I saw the tears. I saw the cheap uniform. I saw the sister I used to carry on my back when she was a child. But I felt absolutely nothing. The bond was permanently severed. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply turned my head away, looking at her as if she were completely invisible, as if she were a ghost. "Clean this mess up immediately," the hotel manager hissed, grabbing the arm of Clara and dragging her away from the guests. "You are fired." Security pulled her out of the grand ballroom. She screamed my name, but the heavy wooden doors slammed shut, silencing her voice forever. I walked up to the grand stage and tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I announced, my voice echoing with pure confidence. "Tonight we raise a glass to the future, and we honor those who truly know the meaning of sacrifice." The crowd erupted in applause. I stood under the bright lights, totally untouchable. The ties were shattered, but for the first time in my life I was finally free. While Clara was fired from her job as a waitress, Julian was fighting his own battle in the dark. The public hospital where he worked as a janitor was the exact same hospital where he used to be a respected surgeon. Every night, he had to mop the floors outside the operating rooms. He had to watch other doctors wearing clean white coats, doing the job he threw away. One evening, an emergency patient was brought into the hallway. The nurses were panicking. "We need a surgeon immediately," a young nurse yelled, looking around the empty corridor. "The patient is bleeding out." Julian dropped his mop. His medical instincts kicked in. "I am a doctor," Julian shouted, running toward the stretcher. "Let me help him. I know what to do." He reached out to touch the patient, but the head of the hospital suddenly walked out of the elevator. He saw the janitor wearing a dirty blue uniform trying to touch a bleeding patient. "Get your hands off him, you filthy janitor," the head of the hospital roared angrily. "Security, get this crazy man out of the medical wing." "I am Julian. I am a certified surgeon." Julian cried desperately as two heavy security guards grabbed his arms. "You are a disgraced bankrupt who lost his medical license," the head of the hospital replied with absolute disgust. "You are a danger to our patients. You are fired. Pack your trash and get out of my hospital." Julian was thrown out the back door into the cold alleyway. He sat on the dirty ground, looking at his shaking hands. The brilliant doctor was dead. Only the ghost of a failure remained. Winter arrived, covering the city in thick, freezing snow. Julian and Clara could no longer afford the rent for their tiny apartment. They were officially evicted. They became homeless, wandering the freezing streets in thin coats. They walked to the massive steel gates of the family estate. The estate was beautifully lit with warm, golden lights. They could see the shadow of Elias walking past the large windows, sitting by a warm fireplace. Julian gripped the cold iron bars of the gate. "Elias, please open the door," Julian screamed into the freezing wind. "We are freezing to death. Please, just let us sleep in the garage." Clara stood beside him, her teeth chattering violently. "I am sorry, Elias," Clara sobbed loudly. "I am so sorry, just give us a blanket. We will do anything." They screamed and cried for hours, but the thick stone walls of the estate absorbed their voices. Inside the warm, quiet house, Elias sat in his leather chair, reading a book. He heard the distant shouting outside the gates. He did not call the police. He did not go outside. He simply turned the page of his book and took a sip of hot tea. The boundary was absolute. They were no longer family. They were just noise in the winter wind. 5 years later, Vanguard Holdings was no longer just a national company. It was a global titan. I stood in the massive, sunlit boardroom on the top floor of my new international headquarters. Dozens of executives from all over the world were sitting at the glass table, waiting for my command. "Mr. Chairman, the acquisition of the European shipping line is complete. My lead attorney announced respectfully. Vanguard Holdings now controls 20% of global logistics. I nodded slowly, looking out the window at the sprawling city below. Excellent, I replied with a calm, commanding voice. Transfer $10 million to the Vanguard Cancer Foundation today. We need to build 3 new pediatric wings by the end of the year. I did not hoard my wealth. I used my immense power to build hospitals, fund schools, and provide scholarships for brilliant students who grew up in poverty. I gave them the college education that I had sacrificed so long ago. I was respected, I was feared, but most importantly, I was truly happy. I had built a new family. A family made of loyal friends, brilliant colleagues, and a beautiful wife who loved me for my heart, not my money. Far below the glowing skyscraper of Vanguard Holdings, in a dark, damp subway station, 2 homeless people sat on a piece of cardboard. They wore ragged, dirty clothes. Their faces were covered in soot and wrinkles. They looked 20 years older than they actually were. A group of college students walked past them, laughing and holding hot cups of coffee. One of the students dropped a shiny magazine on the ground by accident. The homeless man slowly reached out with his trembling, dirt-covered hand and picked up the magazine. The cover of the magazine featured a striking photograph of a powerful, handsome billionaire in a custom black suit. The headline read, "Elias Vanguard, the man who built an empire from nothing." Julian stared at the face of his older brother. A single tear rolled down his dirty cheek. "Look, Clara," Julian whispered, his voice weak and raspy. "It is him." Clara slowly opened her eyes. She looked at the magazine cover. She remembered the estate. She remembered the vintage plates and the warm dinners Elias used to cook for them. She reached out and traced the picture of Elias with her broken fingernail. "He looks so happy," Clara mumbled softly, pulling her thin, torn coat tighter around her freezing shoulders. "He really did it." They sat in the dark, dirty tunnel, holding the magazine like a fragile piece of treasure. It was the only connection they had left to the world of light. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I walked through the beautiful garden of the family estate. The roses were blooming, vibrant, and full of life. The stone fountain flowed with crystal-clear water. My wife walked up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "It is a beautiful day, Elias," my wife said softly, resting her head on my shoulder. I smiled, holding her warm hand. "Yes, it is," I replied quietly. I looked at the restored house. I thought about the 15 years of pain, the betrayal, and the freezing rain. I thought about the 2 parasites I had finally cut away from my soul. They thought my kindness was a weakness. They did not understand that the man who can endure the greatest pain is also the man who can build the strongest fortress. I took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. The ties were completely shattered. The ghosts of the past were gone. The empire was secure. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the water. The street rat was the king, and the king finally had his peace.
I walk through fire in disguise, buried truth beneath their lies. But every scar became my code. Now I won't break, I just reload. The past won't hold me anymore. I'm not who I was before.
From shadows I have found my name.
second chance, a brighter flame.